The people of the Emirates are the makers of its culture, the makers of the impossible. They dream big, act fast, and empower each other. This is what shapes a nation's culture. From all over the Emirates and across the globe, they are working together to make it possible.
The wonderful thing about reading is that it can transport you to another world.
I landed at Dubai Airport in 1968, December, on a BOAC plane onto a tiny little runway. I came down the steps and my feet touched sand. It was dark, there was very little light. I'd come to this part of the world because I'd met my future husband. You know, the rest, I followed my heart. I thought, I cannot bear not to be with him. And so it just meant I just had to follow him. He says that I chased him. Absolutely untrue. Anyway, I came and I've been here ever since. I spoke a few words of Arabic and then I learned a lot very quickly. That was an absolute key for me, was to learn as much Arabic as I could. And I speak with an Emirati accent, and I still make lots of mistakes. I mix up feminine and masculine, but I have no problem with ever understanding. And I have a sort of quite old vocabulary as well, because a lot of the ladies that I was speaking with were older, and so they had different words that maybe are falling out of use now.
So I moved here 23 years ago, worked as a journalist initially, and then had children, stayed at home with the kids for a couple of years, and then started writing fiction. The first 4 are psychological thrillers. The 5th one is a bit more gothic and a bit more maybe almost supernatural. And the 6th one that I'm working on is actually a happy story, completely different.
I've been on a journey of discovery ever since I came to the Emirates, and it's looking for what, in my view, may be missing or is not as rich as it could be. What I noticed really quite quickly when I visited my extended Emirati family was that books did not feature in their homes. They had a wonderful culture of oral poetry and oral storytelling, but they didn't have children's books that lined the walls that children would sit and read. And it seemed to me this was something I had a passion for and I had a love of. And if one thing I could do, it would be to pass that love on to as many Emiratis as possible. I kept trying new things. You know, I'm a bit of an adventurer at heart. I like to explore opportunities. I was with the nephew of Christina Foyles, and his companion says, does the Emirates have a literary festival? And I said no, and we got to talking. She'd said, why don't you pitch this idea to Emirates Airline? So I did, with no real experience of literary festivals. I'd never been to one, but I loved the idea of it. You know, the Emirates is a kind of place where you can dream and dreams can come true. In 2020, we had 204 authors, of whom 46 were Emirati writers. So I think we can take some credit for the growth in the literary society, in the growth of authors writing and aspiring to share stage with multi-million best-selling authors from around the world. It's the most amazing, amazing feeling for all of us, for the authors and for the audiences.
I was sitting at home trying to write a novel and not doing particularly well, you know, getting a bit stuck and wondering, will it ever get published? Will I ever find an agent? Will I ever succeed? And then the Literature Festival launched this competition and I thought, let me enter. So I polished up this synopsis, wrote a brilliant 5 pages, sent it off, and I won the competition. And since then, every year I went back to the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature as an author. As part of that, that's how I came to work in the prison for the first time.
One of the writers that came to the festival in 2019, Claire McIntosh, is a best-selling crime writer. She'd said, would we consider a Writers in Residence programme? And so I then formulated how it would look. And we were absolutely thrilled. And so both Claire and Annabel went into the Dubai prisons to work as writers in residence for a week.
Each prisoner would produce a 2,000-word essay or story, which would be bound in an anthology of prisoner stories from Dubai Central Jail. It was a groundbreaking project. The thoughts that came from them surprised me, and maybe that's my naivety, but they were scared of the future. They were worried about leaving jail. They were worried about being judged by their friends and their family. I thought, here I am, bouncing into your classroom, telling you to write about tomorrow, but that's actually not a very positive thing for many of them. So we talked about tomorrow in abstract terms and tomorrow in literal terms, and tried to sort of get some ideas together to sort of shape the ideas in people's heads about what they might write about.
The inmates who wrote their essays was on the theme of tomorrow, which was the festival theme. And then we had a launch of the book of essays called Tomorrow I Will Fly in the prison.
When I went in for the first workshop, I thought that I was imparting knowledge to these ladies. What I realized was that to them, it means so much more than that. It means to them that someone outside is thinking about them. People haven't forgotten about them, and people care about them and humanize them.
If you ask any writer what is the moment they remember most about their journey, it will be holding that first copy of the first book they wrote in their hands. So it never goes away, and that's why we made it important that there would be physical copies, and we also digitized it so it can be shared, and in fact it's being shared with prisons around the world for their inmates to read this wonderful collection of essays as well. When I first came, there was a very strong tradition of oral poetry, the Nabati poetry, which had been going on for centuries. I'm very, very keen to record Emirati poets. I want to not just have their poems, I want to record their voices, and I want them to be in areas that are, you know, if they're writing about the sea or if they're writing about camels or the desert, I want them in those locations so it comes to life for the rest of the world to understand this part of the world better. This is where my children have grown up, this is where my grandchildren are growing up, and I have a large extended Emirati family who have loved me and accepted me for all my faults from the moment they met me.